back at the serger for this style number 3 suit, and the next step is to sew the shoulder seams, just like the other style number 1 suits. Whoops, that's a legging piece. We don't need that. Okay, so here's the back, or the front, and here's the back. Do these shoulder seams. Now the next step will be sewing the lining and the print together at the neck. Now remember, we only have one of the side seams finished here, so you have kind of this awkward, it's a little bit weird to put this together to get to the neck seam. You can see the back again there, just because the front is a little bit lower. So with that being the back, it's a little bit awkward just because of having that side seam sewn. Now I forgot which is the front and which is the back. Okay, the back is over here. And so the easiest way to get this put together is just to pin the shoulder seams just like we did before. And again, I'm going to turn the print seam allowance toward the back. Just go ahead and sew that up. This whole concept just seems hard for you to grasp. In the ready-made suits, there are a few in there that are style number 3, so you could go kind of pull one of those out and take a look at that and see how it's put together. If you're, I don't remember if you've ordered style number 3 before for you or your girls, but if it doesn't, if what I'm saying doesn't make sense, it will help to just look at one. Okay, so now you're going to pull the lining out of the suit with the right sides together, and we're going to sew the remaining side seam on the lining, and we're going to sew the 2 long side seams on the suit itself. So we're just going to line this up. Okay, now with this lining piece, because you don't backstitch with a serger, there is always the chance that the end of the seam can just start kind of unraveling with the 4 threads that are in there. So what I do is I take this over to the sewing machine and I just put a straight stitch and I just sew right along there. I just kind of go back and forth maybe 2 times just to finish this seam so there's no way that it can unravel. So I'm not going to show that right now, but I definitely do that. So now what we're going to do, starting at the bottom of course, we are going to sew all the way up to the underarm. I usually kind of grab it where the 2 clips are that designate the waist. And then on up to the underarm seam. The other big difference about sewing this style of a suit is that you will do a set-in sleeve. You are actually going to sew the sleeve rather than doing it flat like we do with the other styles of suit. With this particular style, we're actually going to sew the sleeve into a circle and then set it in because we'll have a round hole that we need to fit that into. It took me a while when I came up with this style of suit. It took me a while to kind of figure out how to make it all work. So this might not be the best way, but it's the only way I could figure it out. Someone smarter than me probably could come up with a less complicated way of putting it all together. So you can see these suits are so easy to put together. I know it'll all feel awkward to you for a little bit just because if you're not used to sewing with stretch fabrics, it's a little bit different. But you'll end up loving it because I think they're so much more forgiving when you can stretch to make lengths fit and things. So, but it's not hard. Okay, so like I said, here are my sleeves. And we are going to sew these into a circle at the side seam. And here's the one with the label on it. Okay, so now you're going to take this lining and fold it back down over the suit. So the suit is basically inside out. I hope that makes sense to you. It's inside out, just like you just peeled it off and it was just like that. So we're going to set the sleeves in. You have this hole that's 2 layers now. And again, you want to check your seam allowance directions. Make sure that they're... I do a little more pinning on this just because it's a little more difficult. And now down here, you want the print to go towards the back, which is this. So I'm going to turn this seam allowance toward the back, and this seam allowance toward the front. And I don't even have the sleeve on here at this point. This is just the sleeve opening itself. So since this is the back, then this will be the sleeve without the label on it, which is this one. So you turn it right side out, and always pin it at the top shoulder seam first. Find your clip, and just line up that seam. And now, since I turned the print seam allowance to the back here, I'll just, for the sake of continuity, I'll turn this seam allowance to the back too. And part of the reason that I do that is because the lining, generally, the birthday suit, is really thick. So I don't want too much thickness all going in one direction. So I put those pins, one at the top, one at the bottom, and then I'm going to start sewing kind of over here. And sometimes it can be kind of hard to get started, to get this seam started, just because you're kind of in this awkward spot. So I'll go ahead and line the fabrics all up right here. And sometimes that just helps me to get started. So I want to get all of those raw edges lined up. And make sure I don't get that pin under the needle either. Sometimes you can just, once you get it kind of under the presser foot, you can even just get that pin out of your way. So just, I'm going to take a couple stitches and then just keep checking to make sure you got those raw edges lined up. Once you get started, you can just go to town. But sometimes just getting it to take off at the right thing with all the layers lined up can be a little bit difficult. So I get right up close to that pin, and you want to take a good little bite out of that, because you want to make sure that you get all of the layers into the seam. You're going to love having a serger. They're just great for all kinds of things. Okay, so there I generally kind of take a look over this seam from both sides again just to make sure that I actually caught all of the layers in that seam allowance. But you can kind of turn it right side out. Ooh, I didn't line that up that great. But you know what? It's okay. Usually I like it to be lined up a little closer than that. That's not great. That's going to bug me at night. So, okay. So basically once you get the other sleeve sewn on, that is the end of sewing a style 3 suit. Not so hard, just a lot different than the others.